I was adopted when I was 2.5 months old, January 25th, 1979.
So I was adopted, I believe, when I was 18 months.
You know, we all need support, you know, and they deserve to have, you know, a parent or parents and a family to connect with lifelong. And that's why adoption is so important.
After meeting my biological mother and learning what I read in my in my adoption files, my mother was addicted to prescription drugs and alcohol, and she would not have been able to take care of me very well.
What I know about my birth parents is absolutely nothing. All I was left with was a note, and I was left on a sidewalk in front of an adoption agency, apparently in the winter, with my middle name, which is May, and a birthday.
I would say the majority of adoptions are successful and that they can be lifelong. Sure, there are those rare circumstances where they're not able to do that, but I would say for the most part, they are successful. I think that in Grand Rapids specifically and in West Michigan, we have a really good support system for adoptive families.
My parents were always open that I was adopted. I mean, ever since I was tiny, they brought me home. They'd always told me that I was adopted so that it wasn't a surprise as I got older.
My adoptive parents were very open and honest about it, especially considering they are white, and I currently am not, especially with my entire family being that way. So they were not quiet about it whatsoever. They tried to keep the culture as involved as they could while trying to celebrate some Chinese holidays. I personally never got into it too much until I became a teenager, but they did not hide it at all.
I've always known I was adopted, so that's been one thing that I think is different from some kiddos that have closed adoptions. There's sometimes that closed adoptions, those children don't find out till later or even in their adulthood, if that they were adopted. So that's been a joy for me to have. And since knowing that, I've always wanted to be an adoption worker. So that was kind of my lifelong passion and mission to get there.
How I came about finding my biological family was when I went through the adoption agency. They have a private investigator that comes out, and they start with the last known address of the biological parents. And since my mother's the only one listed on any of my information, they went with her last known address, and it happened to be my grandfather. He was 86 when I first met him, and a World War II vet. And so all of a sudden, here comes this 38-year-old, 40-year-old woman saying, "I'm your only grandchild."
I don't feel any anger or resentment against my birth parents because I know it's hard to be in that situation where you have to figure out if you want to give up a child or not. And I understand that some people aren't able to financially support more than one kid. It just would have been nice to see more of where I came from than just 2 words on a note.
Children need those lifelong connections. You know, they need to know where they've come from. You know, a lot of children that didn't have that open adoption, they'll look back and say, who do I look like? You know, if they don't have pictures of their parents or know what they looked like, who do I look like? Who do I act like? What is my personality like? You know, and so if they can have that open connection with someone, they can answer those questions for them, whether it's their parents or another relative or whatever. When you have a closed adoption, you know, there's a lot of unanswered questions that you may not have. You may not have access to your medical history. You might not have access to, you know, a lot of information that we think everyone deserves, right? I mean, we all deserve, whether we're adopted or not, to know where we came from and know, you know, why we are who we are.
When it comes to being adopted, there are a lot of things that I have dealt with. Medical history very much so is an issue where it's like I have no clue what I could potentially have, not knowing my origins with what my family could have had. and what I possibly can retain. Other issues that I've dealt with, I admit I was bullied a lot because of that, because I was in a region where it was a lot of white kids, and I was one of the 5 Asians in my entire school, where it led to me being bullied a lot. So there were a lot of issues that were from being adopted, but it's okay. I was able to deal with it in the end.
It makes things a lot more difficult because you don't have, I had a fairly extensive history through the adoption agency. Like Julie, she had written a bunch of the stuff down that she knew about for family history. If it wasn't for that, I'd have absolutely no idea what my family history was, especially for medical. So it makes it a lot harder because there's medical issues that could be genetic that I don't have any clue about, and that I don't know if I should be watching for.
For people who are going to be adopted or is adopting a child, the best I can say is don't forget the culture that you came from. Try and respect it as much as you can, and just know your roots. And the more you learn about it, the more you somewhat discover yourself and what the possibilities can be for yourself, while also staying true to where you originally came from.
I would say just be open. Like, if you're adopting a child, be open with them, because that surprise can cause resentment. Like, why didn't you tell me that I was adopted? And just like, if you have information about the adoption or about the biological family, let that be known to the person too.
Patience, have lots of patience and a sense of humor are probably the 2 biggest things that I would ask for families to have and to be aware of. Also having their own awareness of their own triggers and own traumas that they've gone through in their lives. Because sometimes we don't think about it, and then when you have a child in your home and they might be going through some of those same things, families don't always recognize what that's doing to themselves. And so having that, and also being willing and able to seek out services for yourself is another big thing, because trying to navigate all of those feelings on your own end, and how to parent maybe a child who's a different race or ethnicity, and being able to successfully do that and make that child feel at home, and all of those things, having someone to talk to about those is going to be a huge thing. So being open to services and support from any and everyone is one of those big things, I think.
I would just add to that, commitment is important. The question that you asked earlier about how many adoptions are successful. I think, having them commit to that child no matter what, no matter what behavior they may exhibit, no matter what they may be going through, I think commitment is really important. And I think flexibility and adjusting expectations. So when a child is having a little extra problem grieving, or having some big feelings about something, or they're going through a life stage where they're, having a difficult time, really being flexible and meeting the child where they're at, and being able to seek out support services, like Katie said, to not only help that child, but help the whole family, deal with that, I think is really important. They don't have to do it on their own. There are people in the community that can support them and be there for them during those times. And so I think commitment, flexibility is pretty important.
As for myself, what I'm into right now, I am a TDMP major. I'm currently loving it. I'm going into a minor of environmental science. I earned an associate's from Grand Rapids Community College in communications. I like to run, play hockey. We're playing basketball more frequently. As of right now, I try and avoid the stereotypical Asian stuff where it's like playing an instrument anymore, or like loving math and that kind of stuff, which, fun fact, I'm horrible at math. So I break that stereotype. So it's really just school-based for me at this point with not a lot of free time. I get a little bit of free time, and when I do, it's just playing a lot of video games and hanging out with people.
Things are going pretty well. I work at the post office in Stanwood. I am married, 3 adult children. All pretty much have jobs and making their own lives. Go to church every Saturday. Bible studies every other Monday. Going to school to become a social worker for the VA. So things are going pretty good. Just busy.
Children, can never have too many people that love and care for them.